Welcome, students. So, in the last part of discussion, in the last lectures, we started talking about the generation and screening of project ideas, because project ideas means, or the idea is the most important thing, which takes us forward and which helps us to set up the business, say, organizations or our own business, maybe in the form of the startup or any other form. So, we discussed also that how to find out the project ideas, how to identify the project ideas or investment opportunities, and what are the different ways and means and tools and techniques that help us to identify the, say, workable project ideas or investable opportunities where we can make the investment, maybe as a entrepreneur or maybe as a established business organization management or maybe the promoters or in any capacity. So we have to look for that. A number of sources are there. So maybe on the basis of the experiences, or maybe when we are working in the market or when we are scouting for the project ideas, we keep on searching from the multiple sources. But there are some better sources or the better way of looking at the things. And out of that entire process, we can say there are the three ways. Number one is the Porter model, which I discussed with you just in the say beginning of this model in the previous lecture also. Then we have the life cycle approach, and then we have the experience curve. These are the three important tools, apart from so many others also, that we can identify the new investment opportunities, new workable opportunities, or the new, say, investment projects where we can set up the ventures and we can maybe create the, say, large sized organization beginning as a startup, and we can grow with those investment opportunities. So you must have heard the name of Professor Michael Porter. He's a Harvard professor and American businessman also, and he's known for his strategic thinking as well as a consulting experience, or maybe for say his practical experience on the entrepreneurship or setting up the businesses. And in this case, he has developed a model, and that model helps us to understand that, to identify the profit potential, right? Because ultimately business is for the profit. We want to maximize the return on the investment. So if any industry, any particular sector or any particular area has the profit potential, and that is not already harnessed or not properly exploited, so we can go for that, we can look for that, and we can say make use of that particular area or the opportunity or that particular sector. So profit potential is must when we go for the evaluation of any business options available with us. So as we have discussed that we go for the market and demand analysis, we go for technical analysis, and all these analysis later on we translate into the financial analysis, right? So when we go for the financial analysis, what we do? We prepare the projected income statement, which has two parts: trading and profit and loss account. Means first part is a trading account, second part is a profit and loss account. We prepare the projected balance sheet, and that not for 1 or 2 years, but next 5 to 10 years. Say projected financial statements are prepared, and we try to prove it numerically with the help of the data, and on the basis of the market demand and sales we are going to take place, the cost which is going to happen or going to take place when we are into the, say, setting up of that venture or maybe into the manufacturing process. So we have on the one side the total cost, that is the say on account of making different kind of expenses or different kind of investments, and second thing is the outcome in terms of the sales. So the difference between the sales and the cost is ultimately our profit. So initially we all understand that maybe it's for the existing firms or maybe for the new ventures. Initial years may not give you any profit. Maybe sometime we have to incur losses. So we have the loss in the first year, second year, but third year, for example, we arrive at this stage of the no profit, no loss, and fourth year onwards we start earning the profits. So it means ultimately we have to look for what is the profit potential of one particular idea or that venture or that sector which we are going to set up the unit in. So if the profit potential is good, so in this process we have the 3-4 ideas in mind. So we will evaluate all those 3-4 ideas, and out of these 3-4 ideas where the profit potential is maximum, we will accept that. We will go for it, we will accept that. So Porter says that to know the profit potential of an industry, right, it depends upon what? It depends on the combined strength of the 5 basic competitive forces which are shown in this model. 5 basic competitive forces which are shown in this model, and if any entrepreneur is able to handle these forces carefully and effectively, competitively, then I think he is going to maybe make his mark, set up his venture, and prove his mettle in the industry or in that particular market in which he is going to set up that unit. So in this process, when you talk about this model, for example, if you look at it, we are written here that forces that driving industry competition, right? So we have to be very careful that these forces are to be identified in advance, and we have to understand that these competitive forces are important for us. If we are able to handle these competitive forces, then certainly we are going to sustain. But if we are not able to visualize these forces in advance, make the strategies combat those say negative effects of these forces, then probably the venture may not sustain or may not continue to remain in existence. So when you talk about this entire process, this entire model, first of all we start with this first thing, which is the most important thing for us, is the buyers. You want to manufacture anything, you want to generate any service, or you want to have any kind of app or any kind of the e-commerce venture, ultimately for whom we are going to create it. Porter says, first of all, most important thing, buyers, that do we have the buyers for our idea or the product or service which is going to come up? Because if you have the buyers, because manufacturing, I told you, I gave the example of the General Motors, that you think of any kind of the car in this world and you tell us, and the price, if there is not a limitation, then within 15 days we will hand over you the keys of the car. So that kind of the manufacturing environment we are already operating in, we are working in. And since now it's a global world, most of the economies are global, right? So industries or maybe the firms who are the best in the class, they can move from the one economy to the another economy, subject to the conditions prevailing in those economies. But the globalization is a common denominator, and it has helped them to move from one economy to another economy and to do their best. So manufacturing is not an issue. Supply side has improved like anything. When the supply side has improved, it means if X is not manufacturing any product, Y will manufacture. If the Y is not manufacturing, Z will manufacture. For example, in India, it's not the era now that if we have to buy a scooter, we have to depend upon a one company only, largely 1995% market share with the Bajaj Auto Limited. No, the time has gone now. You have the best of the class of the products in the market. If you wanted to buy a car before 1991, we had to either option of the Ambassador or Premier Padmini. Very missed. The third option came miss off late, that is 82 onwards. Then the Suzuki Motors set up that Maruti Suzuki joint venture with the government of India. But largely we didn't have the many options before that. But today that's not the case. If you want to buy any product, suppliers are there, supply side has improved, and as a result of that, buyers' bargaining power has improved. Right? So bargaining power of the buyers, it has improved. It has improved a lot. So if you want to come out with a new product, new service, or anything new for them, first of all, we have to look for, do we have the buyers for that? Can we sell that product or service in the market comfortably, or maybe sufficient market is there? When we talk about the different kind of the analysis we do, and we will discuss these analysis in detail also in the subsequent discussion. First analysis, as we have seen in the past also, is the market and demand analysis. What we try to find out in that market and demand analysis? The buyers. If you have the buyers available, manufacturing or say creating any service is not a problem. Manufacturing of any product, generating of any service is not an issue. It can be done. Technology is there, raw material is there, human resources are there, government support is there. But to whom you are going to sell it, that's a $1 million question. So you have to have the bargaining power of the buyers, you have to think about it, and we call it as kind of a maybe a very, very important factor to be considered, that if any product, any service, any new venture comes up with, are there sufficient buyers or not? Talk about the Paytm, for example. When you talk about the online payment platforms, right? So during COVID or even before that, when the Paytm came into existence, maybe people were not much aware about the online payment system or anything like that. Then later on UPI came, and then so many payment platforms came in the market. So ultimately means the first mover was the Paytm. They recognized this online payment need of the people. They developed that app, and somehow COVID came in between, and people fully became dependent upon the Paytm. Before that, we had that demonetization also, and that the service which was maybe perceived as something maybe not very, very special, became very special over a period of time, and people become dependent upon the services like Paytm. Similarly, you talk about maybe the different products which are coming up in the market. When you talk about these Ola and Uber cabs, earlier we never thought about it, this kind of the things. But now we think that this service is available, and now the buyers are available for this service and people are making use of it. Now, for example, apart from Ola and Uber, if third person has to come up with, there are so many other apps also which are not doing very well because they are not able to visualize the market, take care of the market very carefully, and they are not able to become the effective competitors. So you have to find out if the product or idea is new, are there other buyers, and if it is existing, then how much market share you will be able to snatch from the existing players, and you will be able to make the mark in the market. When we talk about the mobile telephony, when the Jio came in the market from a very large, second largest industrial house in the country, they also had to think many times that already this market is having the 3 to 4 players. Reliance has to move into this market. What special they have to give it to the people so that they have the sufficient buyers of their service. So they had to increase the bargaining power of their buyers in terms of giving the better quality services at the lesser prices. Initially, it was given free of cost. And finally, maybe Jio became maybe now the second largest company in the country at a very faster pace because they could understand the buyer's pulse in terms of the quality of service and the price. They gave that quality, they gave at that price, and now people prefer that they got. So anything you want to manufacture, right? Or for example, these food delivery apps are there, or any kind of the delivery apps are there. Earlier, we never used to think of this kind of the services. But now the people have become very busy, and if anything is available at the doorstep, but somebody must have maybe thought about it that this kind of the services can be created. There are the buyers in the country, and the people love to have the goods and services delivered at their doorstep. So they thought, they conceived the idea, they developed these apps, and they started delivering these goods and services to the people. And today it has become a very, very important requirement because everybody loves that things are coming at their doorstep at almost no extra cost. So either you have to say identify the demand or you have to create the demand. But you have to first of all make sure there are the buyers. If the buyers are available, it means if you manufacture a product, if you generate a service, you will be able to sell that. And if, for example, if we are going to move into existing market, in that case, you understand the bargaining power of the buyers is going to be very, very strong. So you have to come up to their expectations, right? It's not a new product, it's the existing product, and you want to give the one more, means you want to enter as a new player in the market. Already existing players are there. So it means when the bargaining power of the buyers is high, challenges are very, very stiff. That's why Jio had to give the services free of cost for the initial 6 months, because they had to move into a market where the bargaining power of the buyers was very high, right? So it means you call it as DTH services, you call it as the mobile telephony services, you call it as the other services where the stiff competition is there and the buyer's bargaining power is quite high. Sustenance in those areas requires a lot of efforts. But if it's a totally new product, new service, which people have not tested so far, or maybe it's going to be a pioneer in that particular sector or industry, then probably the bargaining power of the people would be less. Because if they like that product or service and only one player is there in the market or two players are there in the market, it means obviously the bargaining power of the buyers will be less and you can create a monopolistic situation, you can charge the high prices. But if the situation is different, if you talk about the Karsan Bhai's Nirma, so at that time he knew that he has to face stiff competition from a large sized company like Hindustan Lever Limited or Hindustan Unilever. So he took a lot of time to bring that product in the market in the form of a proper brand name. He took about almost 20 years of the time, and he knew that this is going to be a stiff competition in the market. But though the bargaining power of the buyers was not very high at that time, people were looking for the substitutes. People were looking for the cheaper range of the washing powders, so people accepted it. And price was also not very high as compared to the HLL products. So people accepted it and easily he could sustain in the market. But in today's era, for example, when we have the series of the cheaper range of the washing powders, even for Nirma also it has become a challenge because the bargaining power of the buyers has increased. So you have to look at that. Are you going to create a specialized product where the bargaining power of the buyers is not very high? And you are going to make a product which is already there in the market or service which is already there in the market. So if the bargaining power is high, you have to make some extra efforts and become very cautious. But if the bargaining power is not high, you are going to have one or two companies, then it's still miss better or easier to sustain in the market, to continue in the market and to establish yourself as a new entrepreneur in the market. So first thing is, the Potter says you have to go for the, maybe looking at the buyers. Who are your buyers and what is their bargaining power? This is the most important thing. This is a very, very important consideration. Second thing is, we have to talk about the substitutes, right? So we have to look at that substitutes are there in the market or not. If we manufacture a product, then people can go with the substitutes if we are not able to deliver at the reasonable price and of the desired quality. What is the substitutes position? If there is no substitute in the market, one or two players in the market, you can understand position would be better. But if there are a number of substitutes available, then certainly you can understand, as a new entrant also, you have to face stiff competition. And maybe if you are moving into a market where already these substitutes are there, again it's going to create a problem. So we have to have a strategy, a different strategy, that maybe if we are not able to deliver the value at the desired price or quality, people have the substitutes and they can move towards those. Or is there any possibility of new substitutes coming up in the due course? Maybe currently there is no substitute, but tomorrow there can be a new substitute coming up. Here we talk about is the threat of the substitutes or the threat of the substitute products. Not at the moment, but how strong the entry barriers are there. If the entry barriers are not very strong, for example, when Karsanbhai came out with the Nirma, he knew that though the existing competition is not very stiff, because HLL is there, their products are in the different, for the different market, in the different range and different quality and different price. So normally I have to not to deal with that market, because I am going to deal with the market which is probably not a focused market of HLL or HUL. So he could say introduce the product in the market. But see, manufacturing of the washing powder was not a very, very typical thing. Entry barriers were not very strong. So looking at the success of the Nirma, many people came into, and they launched their products in the market, and so many substitutes came up in the market. Even HUL also came out with a substitute in the market which was comparable to Nirma in terms of price and quality. And they came to the market, and maybe Nirma had to face a stiff competition. So it means substitutes and their position. So largely it depends upon the entry barriers. For any product, if the entry barriers are very strong, then in that case you can understand substitutes will not come in the market, and if they come, they will take a lot of time. By that time we have already recovered our cost and investment, and we are already on the profit say position, so it doesn't affect us. Maybe we are the leaders in the market and others have to follow what we do. So in that case there is not a problem. If the product is simple, if the service is very simple, entry barriers are almost not there, then you have to be very careful that when you come out with any new idea and you set up the venture, you have to recover the total cost, make it profitable as early as possible. Otherwise, there is every likelihood that the substitutes will give a stiff competition, and the entrepreneur has to face many obstacles. Besides that, now we have the next thing, is another important thing is the suppliers. That's another important consideration in terms of the technical analysis. So on the one side, Porter is talking about the one part on the market and demand analysis, and then he is talking about the technical analysis, because inputs, suppliers inputs in terms of raw material, in terms of maybe other kind of the inputs. So suppliers position, means evaluating the supplier's position is a very important consideration. So on the one side you have the bargaining power, you have to look for the bargaining power of the buyers. You have to look for the substitute products, that if you make investment into plant, building, machinery, everything, if you simply just start manufacturing and substitutes come in the market, so it's a big challenge. Then you have to look at that success of that venture, that idea, that product, that service will largely also depend upon the suppliers. I gave you the example in the past discussion, past lecture, that for example, if you want to set up a very simple, say, enterprise, you can set up this mustard oil manufacturing unit, or any other kind of them. You can start manufacturing spices, or you can have the mustard oil manufacturing units, you can have that flour mill. All these kind of the ideas can be workable ideas, because India is a country of 1.4 billion people. And if you want to move into any manufacturing sector, think about moving into the consumer sector rather than into any technology oriented area, or maybe the consumer durables or automobiles or anything else. Before that, you think about consumer sector is going to one which is not going to give you a very stiff competition, right? So, miss, you can set up this kind of industries. You can start manufacturing the this mustard oil or flour mill, or maybe sometime the spices which are required in every household in India. So you can have that kind of the options available, which don't require very heavy investment also. And since people have to consume something, so if we deliver quality and price is kept as at the reasonable level, I think you can find sufficient market for sustenance in the market. But to a larger extent, right, because the products I'm talking about is they depend upon the agriculture, as the agriculture products is the raw material, and there comes the role of the suppliers. This is, for example, if we are talking about the agriculture inputs, there comes a role of the suppliers. In the industry also, when the existing firms, existing companies, larger organizations, when they go for the expansion, diversification and growth, right, they also look at that who are our suppliers, what is their bargaining power, and are we going to be comfortable with them on the long term basis or not, because they also can create the problems tomorrow. Because as the substitute for our product or service is going to be there can be a substitute to them also. They have not to supply the entire product to the one company. They have to supply it to the many, and whosoever gives them the best price for their output, right, they are going to sell his product, or maybe the total inputs to them or to that particular company. So you have to see it, that what is the bargaining power? Can you have the long term, say, arrangements with them, so that they remain loyal to one company and keep on supplying their entire output to them? Or maybe you have to look for the alternatives. Say, for example, when you talk about this car manufacturing companies or automobile manufacturing companies, they have most of the inputs in these companies come from the outside. They manufacture gearbox or maybe something which is a very say strongly based upon the technology which they own. Rest of the things they buy from the suppliers. For example, you talk about that window pans or the screws or maybe the rubber parts or maybe the tires, maybe the steel, anything you require, you buy from those different suppliers. So these companies, these say end users, maybe they are manufacturing motorcycles, cars or any other, even the consumer durables as well. So they have the long term, say, supply arrangements with the suppliers. They don't work on day-to-day basis, long-term arrangements, right? For the next 5 years, you will give us the steel, you will supply us the tires, you will supply us the screws, you will supply us the window pans, you supply us the rubber parts, right? You will supply us the circuits, picture tubes, anything, maybe in the case of the consumer durables. So long-term arrangements, so that they have to not to get affected from any kind of the, say, increasing bargaining power of the supplier. So you have to be very careful, what is your input, who are the suppliers, and means what kind of the arrangements you are going to make, so that you have the regular supplies at the desirable prices. And finally, whatever that final output price comes up, inputs have to play are going to play a very, very important role. So in that situation, you have to think about the suppliers also, and the bargaining power as is important of the buyers, similarly it's equally important of the suppliers. And then we talk about the substitutes. So these three basic forces, and then we have the next thing is we talk about the potential entrants, right? Means entry barriers. I was just talking to you about is the entry barriers. Is there any threat of the new entrants coming into that particular segment in which we are going to move into? Or there are some strong entry barriers, maybe in terms of the investment, in terms of the technology, in terms of the maybe any other factor? So we have to be very careful. Say, for example, when you talk about the pharmaceutical industry, when they invent a drug, so companies, when they start making investment, they have to be very careful that maybe it's not a company X. They are trying to find out one molecule to cure one particular disease. There could be other companies also who are, say, already working in that particular area. So whosoever comes up as the first mover in the market, or say introduces that molecule or drug in the market, he will have a lot of you can call it as the, say, benefit. So entry barriers is another important thing. If you have a product like Nirma, so it means there is no entry barrier. The process is very simple. So that series of the washing powders came into being after seeing the success of Nirma. So if you talk about a technology product, if you talk about a drug, so their entry barriers may be very strong, because manufacturing or identifying a molecule may not be the ball game of every other competitors. Or when you have you are manufacturing a motorcycle, e-vehicle, car or anything, if the technology barrier is very strong, certainly you can have some time to sustain in the market the moment we bring the product to the market. So see, that also is a very, very important thing, that what is going to be the future of the market, right? What is going to be the future of this particular industry as far as the potential entrants are concerned? If anybody can enter in the market, if they feel that the market is having the potential, it's a profitable, and anybody can enter into the market, then it's really something to be seriously considered, that if we make investments, start manufacturing or delivering this service. But if people come into the market and say many players come into the market, how much market share we will have? So we have to think about in terms of the entry barrier and the potential threat from the new entrants. And last but not the least, existing competition, right? Existing competition, rivalry amongst the firms, existing competition. So you see that when when Jio came in the market, in the mobile telephony market, you understand that the companies who were operating already in the market, they had to face a big challenge, because one new player came in the market, and that new player came with something new, something different in terms of the quality, in terms of the price. And initially they gave the service free of cost. So they introduced the service to the masses, that if you use our service, it's going to be certainly better than the services of the existing the service providers. Airtel had to face a very big challenge. Vodafone became a loss-making company. Even Airtel also is a loss-making company. Idea and Vodafone had to move into a joint venture. BSNL lost its market. So it was a big challenge to the existing firms. As a result of this competition, bargaining power of the buyers increased. So services became cheaper to the buyer. But we talk about the players, existing four companies, right? Airtel, Vodafone, Idea and BSNL. They had to face a big challenge. So, but it was ultimately they could sustain in the market. Jio could get the lion's share in the market. They have become now the second largest mobile telephony company in the country, because they could understand that there is potential in the market in terms of say increasing the competition, winning over the customers, giving something new and different to the customers, and increase the competition in the market. So today there is maybe a kind of a situation which has created a stiff competition in the mobile telephony market. That's why the prices are within a controllable range, and the consumers or the users are at the maybe at the benefiting position, and they can bargain. If any company doesn't give the better service today, we move to the other company. If the other company doesn't give, we move to the other company. So that maybe a stiff competition in the market is one important consideration. Earlier, if you talk about the era before 1991, see, there were one or two suppliers in this whole market of more than 1 billion people. If you want to buy steel, SAIL is the company which is having the 90% market share. Whatever the product they are manufacturing and whatever the price they are going to sell the product at, you have to buy it. You want to buy a car, very few, one or two players. If you want to buy a scooter, only one player in the market. If you want to buy a CTB, washing machine, refrigerator, there are many players in the market, but they are all of same quality, same service and same price. So where to go? But today, compared to the pre-globalization era and the post-globalization era, if you talk about these two eras, you can understand there is a lot of change in the market dynamics. And because of the improved supply side, improved competition in the market, and existence of the multiple players in the market has ultimately benefited the consumers. But in this process, many existing companies have died. Many existing firms have died. Talk about the Indian companies who were into the electronics market, manufacturing washing machines, CTVs or refrigerators, right? Even the companies which has the largest market share, like the Onida, Videocon, they had the market shares, right? 45% market share was with these two companies. Where are these two companies now today? Today in the market, if you want to buy a CTV, you go for Samsung, you go for LG, you go for Sony. Nobody even thinks of Onida. And there was a time when the having Onida TV was a matter of pride for all of us. And their punchline was, neighbors envy, honors pride. But today we don't want to buy their product. So because of the intensified competition, right, because of the intensified competition in the market, though the consumer stands to gain, but it's a big challenge to the business players or to the business enterprises. So you have to be very careful that are there other buyers? Number one, yes, substitutes are there in the market, or any possibility, any threat of the substitutes coming in the market? Yes or no? Who are going to be your suppliers and how powerful they are? Can we have the long term supply arrangements with them? And entry barriers or the potential entrants. And last one is that the existing competitive scenario in the market. How many players are there? What is their, say, intercompany position, overall competitive, say, strength, or maybe the weaknesses of the companies existing in the market? Can we deal with them? Can we compete with them? If you take into consideration these 5 forces, competitive forces you talk it as, Porter has called them as the competitive forces, because they can change the market dynamics at any point of time. Don't think that any corner of any market you select today and keep on floating in that market. That corner is also not safe for you. Anybody can come, any multinational can come in that market and can start competing with you, and you can be wiped out of the market. So you have to be very, very careful. You have to be very, very particular when evaluating the different project ideas or investment opportunities. Always think in terms of this model, 5 forces identified by Michael Porter, Professor Michael Porter in this model, and they are important guiding force to us, and they can help us to understand. If we understand these things very carefully and meticulously, then I think half of the battle we stand already won. But if we are not going to take care of all these factors very seriously, carefully, and maybe we launch the product and somehow the substitutes came in the market, or the new players come up in the market, the competition goes up, or sometimes the suppliers start playing the, say, maybe the gimmicks with us, or maybe they start dictating the terms on us. So maybe sometime an existing firm or a well established, say, maybe the venture have to face the challenge, and maybe sometime it can lead to the closure of those ventures. So this model is the one important, as you call it, as the way when we can look at that. When you talk about the different tools and techniques, we can always refer to this model which has the practical implications, and we can draw a lot of clues from this model and the outcome, or maybe the, say, the 5 forces identified in this model. On the basis of these tools and say this particular model, because they are based upon the practical orientation, we can be successful entrepreneurs in the market. And whenever we come in the market, make any kind of investments in the market, it's going to be a fruitful venture for us, and it's going to sustain for long. So with this discussion, I will stop here for this lecture. And in the next class, we will talk about the remaining 2 techniques or the 2 tools, which are life cycle approach and then the experience curve. So these are the 3 important tools of identifying the new investment opportunities. Thereafter, we will proceed further with the further discussion. Till then, thank you very much.